Hi, welcome to my blank wall. Let's paint something to put there, shall we? This is boring. I don't like it. Let's put something there. I have a vision. I have a vision of a painting of a landscape of Lima, like the coast of Lima and the ocean. And I have some photos that I want to paint from, and I want to work on that today. So please come with me. Here we are in Michael's, and I am trying to find the paint section. Okay, I see fine art supplies because I want some acrylic paint and a canvas or two to work with. So I'm here in Michael's looking at the acrylic paint, and I'm seeing that the acrylic paint's pretty expensive. Well, probably oil paint is expensive also, but something that I like about Michael's is they usually have sales. So they're having a sale on this brand. Maybe this is their Michael's brand. I don't know. I'm gonna look and see if I can see something that would work. We need a palette knife and we need a bigger brush because I don't have one. So for palette knives, I like the shape of this one. Sometimes when you use these long ones, it gets a little annoying because the edge starts to be far away from what you're trying to do. So I actually kind of like this, I think. I'll try. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's fine. $3.99. Yes. We're doing this on a budget. It's not falling apart. Good. This is a really good shape for a lot of purposes because it can cover a lot of area, but you have kind of like a sharp, like a point at the end. So this is a good shape if you don't want to buy a lot of different brushes, because if you see the shape here, the edges on this one are going to create more like sharp brush strokes, and then this gives you more versatility of different types of brush strokes. So I'm just kind of trying to take a look to see the size, because I want to be able to cover a lot of area, but I don't want to buy a lot of brushes. So maybe this. This is actually fine because I realized all these colors are in the set, and this is probably a very basic quality, but I just want to give it a try. So taking that one, not this one. Okay, here we are in the canvases. When you're looking at canvases, I would recommend think about the edges. Think about how far away from the wall you want your painting to be. You know, that's a little bit thicker, and then this is gonna sit, you know, closer to the wall, obviously, because it's got a thinner edge. And I think that's fine. It just depends on what you want. And one thing to avoid, I don't see any here, but sometimes, maybe here. No, I actually don't see any. Maybe they're not producing them anymore. There used to be canvases where you could see the staples like on the edges. You could see like staples here, and that was very ugly and almost impossible to cover up. So I'm glad that I don't see those. This is the photo that I was working with. It's a photo I took in Lima, Peru. And this is me doing some sketching in Procreate. And I really like Procreate on my iPad because I can work out some ideas before I start doing anything else on the canvas. And that's kind of cool. So I was just trying to figure out where things are going to go. And then this is me, you know, starting to draw on the canvas. I haven't done a painting in years. I can't remember the last time I did a painting, to be honest with you. So this is definitely a learning experience. This was definitely a learning experience for me. And now that I've done this, I think what I should have done is tone the canvas brown first and then do do a pencil drawing on that very lightly and try to go from the pencil drawing instead of drawing these dark lines on the canvas, because once those dark lines are there, it's a little bit hard to do anything with them. You know, they're kind of there, and it's all right. It's a style, but I guess I'm a little bit struggling with this question of, do I really want lines to show, or do I not want lines? I'm a bit torn because I love lines, I love drawing, and I really like this sort of almost comic book style where you can see dark outlines remaining. On the other hand, it's kind of cool to explore what paint can do, and life doesn't have lines in a way, you know, so paint can kind of give you this realism that you can achieve without drawing lines as if it were a drawing. I don't know, it's a little complicated. I fight with myself in my mind about these things a lot. I wanted to show you here that it can be helpful to mix a light, medium, and dark of an area when you're working with it, so that when you're trying to make something look three-dimensional, it helps to have three values, a light, a medium, and a dark, already mixed. Especially working with acrylic, because acrylic dries so quickly, I think it's good to mix those dark, medium, light of the area you're working with, because you want to have that ready when you get to that part, and you don't want to stop every time you want something darker to mix a dark, and then every time you want something lighter, mix the lighter one. I think it helps to have those three values already mixed, so that you don't have to keep stopping every time you want to make something a little darker, something a little lighter. And having it mixed means you won't just suddenly run out when you're trying to, you know, oh, I want to paint the bushes here, I want to paint the trees. Oh, I don't have anything dark enough. Okay, I want a little lighter, and I don't have anything light enough. I ran out. You know, that can be very time consuming and also kind of just stop the creativity. So I recommend mixing at least three of the part that you're working on, the, I guess, area or main color that you're working on. Greens are difficult, and I recommend that if you want your work to look unique, I think it helps to mix your green very carefully, and don't just use the green that comes out of the tube. It can be tempting because these sets a lot of times come with pre-mixed colors, but I think it's better to mix your own. That will give your work a unique stamp of your own, and also just something looks different when you mix the green. And you can start with the green that comes in the tubes. You don't have to just start with, you know, yellow and blue, although you can do that too. You can use the green that comes with your set, look at it, and try to judge whether you like it, and you can kind of incorporate it. You don't have to just stop with the green that comes in the tube. You can use some of that green, you can add blue, you can add yellow, you can add different yellows. You know, that this acrylic set that I bought came with two different yellows, and I used one yellow for these colors, and I used a different yellow, I think, for the sky or maybe for the water. I don't know, but I chose the yellows that seemed right to me, and that's another thing you can do. But I guess what I'm saying is that with all the colors, and especially with green, I think it helps to mix what you want instead of settling for what comes with your paints, you know, because that makes it unique. It's fun. I think it's fun to mix the colors. I realized that I didn't explain the reason that I, toned the canvas brown, or the reason I did that here. I think it's easier to be painting on a medium value canvas than it is to be painting painting on a canvas that is pure white, because when it doesn't have to be brown, it could be gray, it could be a different color that you find in your painting, it could be a different shade of brown. It's not really the color so much, although you should think about that color might show through under your paint. So it should be a color that you find in the painting that you're working with and the colors that you're working with. But anyway, what's most important is that it's kind of a medium value. It's in the middle. It's not really light, it's not really dark. And that helps for you to judge the lights and the darks when you're painting. I think it's much harder to look at this blinding white canvas and then try to figure out, what is the medium, what's the dark and the light here. It kind of leads me to this compulsion to cover up the white, and if you are kind of focused on covering up the white, I find that what happens to me, I end up covering it up with stuff that I wasn't happy with, and then I have to cover it again, and it leads to painting and then painting over what I painted, and that can be a difficult cycle, once you start down that road. Anyway, I guess I'm just trying to say that's the reason that I use the brown to cover the whole, canvas before painting new colors on top of it. I think it's very helpful. With the colors of the ocean, I wanted to do something. It doesn't match. It's not what you see in the photo that I'm working with. This is a color that I basically made up, but it's kind of, I'm trying to portray my feeling when I look at the ocean. When I looked at this scene, and I looked at these beautiful greens in the hill, the hill there, or the cliffs, and then the ocean against it, there's a contrast in person looking with your eyes between the color of the water and the color of the cliffs. And I see in person these tones. And so even though it's not really in the photo, I chose to put it there because that's what was in my mind that I wanted to see looking at this painting in the end when it's finished. And I think it's good to remember that the photo is a starting point, it's a reference, but you don't need to copy it exactly, because remember that the camera is interpreting the scene in one way, but you as a human being can interpret it a different way. And I think it's cool to use the photo as a guide, but also use your own creativity and your feeling when you are looking at a place or your subject, and try to portray how you feel, and not only how it looks, because the camera is a tool and the camera doesn't feel the way we do as humans. So that's something that's so cool and beautiful about art, is that we can infuse our feelings and we can try to communicate those feelings to whoever is looking at the painting, and we can kind of communicate across, I was going to say time, but it's not really time, kind of like across time and space to ourselves looking at that painting later, and other people who might look at the painting. It's I don't know, that's the magic part, I guess. Anyway, so here I was painting, when you look down at this, you can see the coastline, kind of like the beach, and then you can see there's a highway down there. And I chose not to paint the cars that are on the road because I didn't want to have those man-made objects in this scene, which is more like a natural scene. So, and I just wasn't sure if I can make them look right when I put I put thought into these rocks and the ocean and everything, and I just wasn't confident in putting cars into the mix. So I chose to paint the highway down there, but not the cars on it. I did include in the distance, there's I guess you would call it a pagoda. There's a park out there, and there is that little building over there in the distance, and it really is there. And so that's a man-made object, but the cars felt like too much, so I didn't include them. Here I started painting the mountains back here, and I was trying to mix those colors carefully because I wanted those mountains to be a different color than the water, the ocean, and a different color than the sky. And I mixed, it's mostly two colors of those mountains. Whenever I get to this part of the painting, I start having a lot of doubts, and I start being really scared that I'm going to mess something up. I just have to keep going. That can be really difficult to deal with, those fears, but you just have to keep going, and that's the only way. The only way to get past them is to move forward. So I guess when you get closer to being done, it's a little scary because I don't know. It can be a little scary because I start to be ready to go, I'm going to make a wrong mark, I'm going to have to cover it up. I know there's no point in these things. Anyway, so here I was trying to sort of model the mountains and kind of keep them in the distance. Something that is accurate for me, something that I keep in mind, even when I'm making something like this that is not really meant to be absolute realism. It's an interpretation of nature, of reality, but certain things apply, which is that the most contrast, like very light and very dark, tends to bring things forward, and lighter colors and more contrasting colors. So the rocks in the front are dark and light, and there's a big difference between the dark and light, but in the mountains in the back, it's not the lightest part of those mountains and the darkest part is pretty close together. There's not a whole lot of contrast back there, and that's kind of part of what keeps it the illusion of distance. So that's something to think about. And then mixing the yellow color there, which I really did see in the sky at the time that I took the photo, it was important to keep that separate from blue because I don't want that to turn into green. So I had to be careful mixing those yellows. But this was a really fun painting to do and a fun experiment with acrylic. Never used it before, and it was cool. So thanks for watching this process. Here it is, hanging on the wall. Maybe I have it hanging a little too high. I don't know. I will work on that, but I feel happy with the colors. It's really interesting. I want to tell you about some things I learned, but here it is in place. Thanks for hanging out with me to paint that. I wanted to tell you a couple things that I learned about acrylic, or just things I wanted to pass on, things I remembered about painting. Okay, so painting is really frustrating for me, I'll be honest. It does not come easily, and I have so many like voices telling me, not voices, not in that way, but I mean like I have a negative kind of talk track in my mind telling me, give up, this doesn't look good, don't keep going, but I'm ignoring those thoughts. Those are not constructive. Something else I wanted to say, about colors, something about colors, is that I think it's important to try to mix your colors on your palette, not on the painting. Okay, what do I mean by that? When you're mixing your colors, I think there's a time when you're mixing and it doesn't feel right. It might look close, when you're looking at it on the palette, but it doesn't feel right. But then when it feels right, when you feel right about the color, that's the time to put it on the painting. When you don't feel right about the color yet, don't put it there and try to make it work on the painting itself. I have found that it only works when you feel, it's like this feeling, and I don't know where it comes from, when you feel that it's right. And you might not know if it's too light or too dark, and you might kind of need to hold it up or even put a little bit and see, but you should feel that you should feel that the color, I forgot the artistic name for the color, I'm sorry, the hue. You should feel, there's this feeling that comes when it's the right color for the painting, when it feels right. I have found that if I mix something and it looks close and maybe it might work, that's not going to work. I don't know why, but if I try to put something on the canvas that I don't have that feeling about, it's not going to look right. And once you put it there, it's really hard to, once you put it there, you have to deal with it. You have to cover it up if it's not right. You have to kind of blend it in, something. So I think it's much better to mix on the palette if you can. And something that I appreciate about paintings, like master paintings that I enjoy, is that the colors, you can see colors existing next to each other, and those colors are pure. They're not mixing unless the artist meant for them to mix. So, for example, the blues of the ocean in this painting, I tried really hard to keep them saturated without any brown, because I've been doing all this brown of the rocks, and if I get that into the blue of the water, unless I mean to do that, it's not going to look right, because it's going to look like a mistake, like I mixed things over here and I accidentally put it over here. So when you're putting colors down, I think it's good to be intentional and try not to get colors from one area of your painting into a different area of your painting unless you want that. But that's something that I'm always learning, of course, and it's a little bit different trying to do it with acrylic than oil. In one way, I found acrylic more forgiving on the painting, because I could, paint an area and then it would be dry almost immediately. And so then I could go over it with more colors if I wanted. I could kind of layer. But with oil, you can do that, but I find it much more difficult, because once you paint something there, it's wet. And so to paint something else on top of it, you have to be really careful, because very quickly the paint can become thick. And then you really can't, it's much harder to work with it once it becomes really thick on the surface, and you start having this melding of colors that maybe you didn't mean to, kind of like what I was talking about before. It gets much harder to control if you let the surface get too thick, unless you're doing that on purpose. That's part of the art of it. That's why it's so difficult. That's why someone like John Singer Sargent is so amazing, because you can look at his paintings and you can see the brush strokes and you can see the surface and the thickness of the paint where he wants you to, but he's controlling it, and it's very difficult to do. So it was really interesting to try acrylic and kind of see, you know, it's kind of more forgiving for me. It was kind of more forgiving on the painting itself because I could quickly, you know, paint over something or layer something. But on the palette, it's not as forgiving because with oil, you can mix colors and then leave them there and they're not going to get dry for a long time. So you can do an area and then you can go and do the water and then you can go back to the rocks and the paint for the rocks will still be wet there and you can use that paint again. But with acrylic, it's like, okay, you need to finish this part. You need to finish with this paint because if you mix up colors for an area and then you work on something else and then you go back to where you were, that's probably going to be dry. You can't kind of just go back to those colors like you were, like you would with oils. So that was something for me to learn. But I didn't even know, like the acrylics that I bought were not the fancy ones. They were, I don't know, like the level 1 quality or whatnot, like this, probably the student quality, but I thought that I was happy with the colors that I was able to make with that set that I bought, and I felt kind of pleasantly surprised by how I was able to get colors that I was happy with. I wasn't sure because I think the colors that you can make depend on you're depending a lot on the paint, you know, on the quality. And so I was kind of happy with how that acrylic set turned out. I think it was the Michaels brand, I'm not sure. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to share. Definitely I'm trying to figure out, well, I feel much more comfortable with drawing, and to translate from drawing to painting, I don't feel is so easy. So thank you for watching and coming on this journey with me. I guess I'm just going to keep exploring, and I hope that you'll explore with me, and maybe I can pass on a few things if I see any tips that I could share. Those are the ones that I could think of for now. Okay, thanks for coming, and I'll see you next time.